Well, we're actually living with some effects of that budget crisis.
Okay.
Because in the 70s is when Prop 13 passed.
Okay.
And that had a dramatic effect on the state's revenues, an effect that we're still feeling today.
And for people that don't necessarily know what that is exactly, could you explain a little more?
Prop 13 was, and this is really just, from my perspective, a really boiled down version of it, but essentially it limited the rise in property taxes. It limited it for homeowners, although it didn't, but I'll leave it at that. It limited it for homeowners. And that was good for people who were on fixed incomes, older people who were concerned about their ability to support the rise in property taxes when they were on fixed incomes. That was the driver behind it. But it limited the state's revenue permanently. And in fact, to this day, whenever anyone talks about trying to make a change to Prop 13, to refine it, to maybe treat business differently than homeowners are treated, it's called the third rail of politics. And so everyone is afraid to touch it for fear of getting electrocuted. Although there is discussion afoot right now of making some revisions to it. So several things that happened in the wake of that. One is that's when, it was in the wake of that student enrollment fees were instituted. Community colleges were free. At the time I started teaching in 1975, community colleges were totally free. There were no fees. Obviously there were textbooks and living expenses and all that, but there was no enrollment fee. I think it's important for students to act locally first, as on any issue. And so an important way of getting involved is to be engaged in student government here at the college, and in student advocacy around budget issues on a statewide level. Our local AS, Associated Students, is plugged into a statewide student organization that's very involved in lobbying the legislature around funding for community colleges. So I'd encourage people to get engaged with that. Whether or not they decide they want to become officers or senators, they can still be involved in that political advocacy.
Just supporting the student government.
Yes, I think that's a very important channel for student voices. At Skyline, we haven't made particular cuts to physical education.
Okay.
There has been a statewide concern about physical education because there was a move afoot from the state chancellor's office to limit the amount of physical education that is offered. Apparently there are some colleges which are, and we're not one of them, which are seen as offering an excessive amount of physical education. And that's not going on here, so we don't have anything to worry about in that case. But if the state decided to engage itself in determining what the curriculum would be at the local level, at local colleges, that would be a big worry.
Okay.
That would be a big worry.
So right now we determine that ourselves?
We do, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, we do it in the normal way like we do for all disciplines. Well, let's see, how do I put that? We have gone through a process this year to try and balance our budget for next year. We're estimating what our revenue will be as best we can based on the information we have from the state. And everyone's waiting to see what the governor's May revision to his budget will say on Friday. That's an important turning point in every year to find out kind of what's the governor's office believe about what the state's revenues will be, how much money will go out, how much will go to higher education, specifically community colleges. So we're watching that like a hawk.
So that's state budget, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
That's state budget. So we've gone through a budget process here at our college and within our district that has created a budget that's balanced for next year with some cushion in it in case there are cuts.
Okay.
So I think we're on more or less of an even keel for 1 year. The year after that is much harder to predict. I'm sure students are very aware that we are offering fewer sections than we used to. We reduced sections in the spring semester by about 10%, and we'll do the same in the fall. Our summer session is about 20% smaller. So we're not able to offer as many classes. And the classes we are offering are just jammed with students. So that's going to be our life for at least a couple of years.
And as far as I know myself personally, I had trouble finding classes even the day after my registration day. That's
wow.
Something we can expect to see for.
I think so. It's going to be competitive, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Which means it's important for students to register as early as they can, and to have alternatives in mind, both in terms of time of day and what classes can fulfill certain requirements.
Okay. And if I get your thoughts a little bit as well, myself personally, I'm a returning student to Skyline after being affected by the budget crisis of the Cal State system. So I was going to get a second degree and was denied from doing so. So I think a lot of the students don't understand how much this may affect their future. If you could maybe elaborate on that a little bit, as far as where you see it may be difficult for if students don't get involved, what's going to happen, that sort of thing.
I think that the consequences of this tight budget are many, and you're pointing out another one. It's not just that we offer fewer classes and that they're fuller, but part of why they're fuller is because we're getting students redirecting from Cal State. We're also getting students redirecting from the City College of San Francisco. They're not offering a summer session. So students from there since we're the next closest college, are coming to us. So it's really important that students set themselves up for alternatives, that they try to find a path for their education that will give them alternatives as they move to the next level, whether it's in the workforce or ultimately to transfer to a public institution or a private institution. And that means they need to be savvy about what the financial aid options are. We know in general, nationally and statewide, and I'm sure it's true here too, that there are students that are eligible for financial aid that don't apply for it. So if people are trying to figure out how can I get done what I need to do, and they don't know if they're eligible, they should talk to someone at the financial aid office to find out those possibilities. But it requires a kind of responsibility and engagement on the part of individual students looking out for themselves in a much more active way. Our counseling staff are very eager to help all that they can, and we're trying to provide as much of that resource as we can. We've added more online services for students in hopes that they can get some of what they need there, but it really requires that students kind of take their situation in hand and be very engaged in finding out what